Thanks, Cecily. Thanks to all of you for coming out. It's nice to be able to do this, and it's nice to have such a great room for it. Thank you, everyone at Malvern, for having us. Appreciate it. I was going to read a story in here that's about a political campaign that has gone horribly strange. And then I kind of thought, no, there's really just been altogether too much of that. So I'm going to read a different thing. I'm going to read 3 sections of a story that is in 5 parts. And it's called Little Reptiles, and it is ostensibly about reptiles, but it's also a little suite of anxieties. And it starts with a quote from St. Teresa of Avila. "Let us strive to do what is in our power and guard ourselves against these poisonous little reptiles. For the Lord often desires that bad thoughts afflict and pursue us without our being able to get rid of them. Sometimes he even permits these reptiles to bite us." Number 1, boom slang. On an after-hours tour of the Natural History Museum, my friend the herpetologist shows me the laboratory in which 50 years ago the division's curator gathered with several colleagues to puzzle over an African tree snake that the city zoo had sent for identification. 30 inches long, bright green and black beaded, with folding rear fangs. It was almost certainly a boom slang, they agreed, but for the matter of the anal plate, which ought to have been divided, but wasn't. The men were confounded. This snake was a taxonomical impossibility. The curator picked it up for a closer look, but he took his grip too far behind the head, and the snake whipped around and struck, burying those rear fangs into the soft flesh at the base of his thumb. That it was a boom slang was dramatically manifested by its behavior, the curator would write. Still, they all agreed the snake was young and had been in captivity for some time, so it wouldn't possess venom in enough quantity or potency for the bite to be fatal. The curator did the old cut and suck, then retreated to his office to chronicle his symptoms as the hemotoxin pulsed through his body. By 2:30, the area around the puncture had blackened. By 4, he had developed chills that shook him as he donned his overcoat and headed for the suburban train. On the train, he noted waves of nausea. At home, in bed with heating pad, pencil, and notebook, he recorded continued nausea, a fever spike, bleeding from the mouth. Midnight, blood in urine. Later, just blood, no urine, plus abdominal pain and violent nausea. In the morning, heavy-lidded and sore, he paused in his writing and asked his wife to call the museum and say he'd be back at work the following day. Mouth and nose continuing to bleed, though not excessively, he wrote. This was his final entry. He fell into a coma. By 3:15 p.m., he was dead. His colleagues, though saddened, told the newspapers that a good herpetologist never misses an opportunity to record a case study. His wife's thoughts on this subject were not reported. The office that once belonged to the late curator is locked, and it has someone else's nameplate on it besides, but I linger there, one hand on the dark-grained wood, and I imagine him in his office that afternoon, in his creaky chair behind his bulky desk, staring at his hand as he flexes his swollen thumb. Along one wall are maps of southern Africa, India, the Pantanal. Along another are 2 tall and pack-tight bookshelves. At his back, a window open to the lake breeze. On his desk, a Gila monster skull serves as a paperweight. Perhaps he has a moment of doubt. Perhaps he finds himself with the telephone in his good hand, about to connect to the hospital. But he turns his gaze to the clock on his wall, brutishly plain as institutional clocks are, with cold black numbers on a white face and a second hand that buzzes insect-like as it sweeps its arc. And he decides he can catch the next train home if he hurries. The air around me is chilly and spiced with formaldehyde. My friend calls from down the hallway, tells me to hurry up because we have much more to see in the museum tonight. The lab where a T-Rex is being reassembled, a fearsome collection of shark jaws, the insane menagerie that is the birds of prey specimen room. I let my hand drop from the curator's door, suddenly sheepish. I am 40 and graying. By now, I ought to know what, if anything, I will give my life to or for. In the distance, down some other hallway of the vast museum, a floor polisher thrums and thrums, getting the place clean for tomorrow's visitors. We'll skip number 2 and go to 3, the Argus Monitor. The Argus Monitor, aka Varanus panoptes, is a diurnal metaphor and an important predator in today's global biomeme. In Greek mythology, Argus panoptes was a giant with 100 eyes who was assigned by Hera to guard a white heifer from Zeus, that crazed runner. The Argus Monitor has sharp claws for digging, climbing, and ripping apart aesthetic distance. The Argus Monitor is a major employer in most American cities and towns, but it is nervous and quick to startle. When scanning its environs, the Argus Monitor will often tripod, i.e. raise itself high on its hind legs and tail. It sees all. Keep your shoes shined, your underthings clean, and your paperwork up to date. A powerfully built, rapacious eating machine, the Argus Monitor is the bottomless pit of the animal kingdom, feeding on snakes, insects, corn syrup solids, rodents, birds, consent, the fountainhead, frogs, rage, synecdoche, arbitrage, apathy, wounded dingoes, Tibet, that new car smell, situation comedy, marketing majors, Bowery River crab, restraint, theocratic impulses, the rule against perpetuities, wonder, exhaustion, degenerate art, collateralized prey obligations, the missionary position, phenomenology, cake, the proposed Trans-Afghanistan pipeline, and in times of scarcity, other monitors. Off camera, Marlon Perkins would refer to the Argus Monitor as a bad mamma jamma. The Argus Monitor's droppings are super concentrated pellets of hope and bones, prized as trophies by some and protein sources by others. More precise demographic breakdowns remain unavailable, however, due to budget cuts at the research facility. The Argus Monitor pays well. Sweet rutting Zeus, does it ever. On March 14th, 1983, an Argus Monitor urinated on Johnny Carson's shoulder during a live broadcast of NBC's Tonight Show. When they cut to commercial, it tore off and devoured both of the TV host's legs. The Argus Monitor offers many opportunities for internships as well. Venom, you damn skippy. It prefers to bask in the morning with a 2-gallon monolithic gulp of coffee, a raw goat, a bowl of white phosphorus, and the Wall Street Journal it has swiped from its neighbor's driveway. The Argus Monitor has a forked tongue and a vomeronasal organ in the roof of its mouth, which is why one should not speak ill of it, and also on account of it pays so well. Its underside is cream-colored and surprisingly soft. Number 5, the gharial. Lately, every time you finish a story, the gharial that lives under your writing desk darts out and bites off one of your toes, then scutters back into the shadows. To ask how it knows you've finished is pointless. It just does. Anyway, it's sad how little work you finish, but it's understandable. A person needs to walk, after all. When you limp into your psychiatrist's office, he asks, "What's the matter?" "I have a gharial problem," you say. You wanted to bring a photo to show him, but every shot you've taken has come out as a murky, blurred nada. The creature is surprisingly quick. Why, if it weren't for your lost toes and the dark red spatters and swirls on the hardwood floor of your office, you would doubt its existence yourself. Your psychiatrist admits he knows next to nothing about this species of reptile, apart from the fact that gharials have narrow jaws and long snouts that are ideally suited to their piscivorous feeding habits. They're native to the Indian subcontinent, you offer, because you've looked it up, although apparently they can thrive indoors in central Texas, too. Yes, he agrees, and also, they rarely, if ever, attack humans. But if one were to, it makes a degree of sense that it would choose a writer. You ponder this. Is it because they can sense the dread in our blood? Precisely, he says. Studies have shown that dread is sweet and umami rich. He gives you a referral to a specialist, an old college roommate of his, who runs a semi-licensed snake farm on a ranch road outside Wimberley. You ask if your insurance will cover your consultation with the herpiculturalist, explaining how on account of, money and your utter lack of it, and also how these days the things you get paid for, stories, require body parts from you, even if they are minor ones, etc. Oh, almost certainly not, he says, but he hands you a sack full of benzodiazepines, which you interpret as an expression of empathy. You arrive at the snake farm late in the afternoon under a seasonal effective gray sky and find the man sitting in a recliner on a spacious screened porch. Around him are chunky metal filing cabinets, the drawers all open and spilling out loose papers. Come on in, he says, having heard your uneven footsteps as you scuffed your way up the gravel drive. At the door, you peer through the screen and sense motion everywhere, dark shapes creeping and pulsing and darting along. Snakes writhe around on the floor, slither twist over and around the man's boots and his faded denim thighs and his faded tat arms, wrap themselves around the brim of his 10-gallon hat, curl in and out of the file drawers. You catch glimpses of bushmasters and taipans and banded crates. Armored lizards jostle and grunt and snap as they raid a trough full of meat that smells like steak fajitas. A snapping turtle lies in wait inside a Scooby-Doo kiddie pool, sizing up a fat feeder frog. Caimans and crocs prowl the inner perimeter and regard you in ways you do not like. The screen looks too thin to hold back 1,000 pounds of reptile on the attack. Your phantom toes start to itch inside your new steel-toed boots, your latest attempt to up-armor. Come on in, he says again. Don't be a stranger. I'll stay out here, you say. I just need to know if you can help me with my gharial problem. Depends, he says. Do I get to keep the critter, or are you looking to eat it? Eat it? Something about the idea appeals to you. Vengeance, perhaps, or irony. But the itching flares up hotter now, maddening, and you tell him you don't care what happens to it, you just want the damn thing gone. Gharial grills up nice, he says. And it sounds like he's smiling, but you have trouble seeing his face because of the steady traffic of snakes traveling across it. He says he'll need cash in advance, and you pay eagerly. You figure you'll make the money back with 2, maybe 3 new stories. Driving back to the city as the last daylight leaks out of the miserable sky, you take off your boots, set the cruise control, and scratch, scratch, scratch all the way home. 2 days later, he rings your doorbell. Wings of white hair poke out from under his hat. Without snakes obscuring his face, you can see he's handsome in that leathery half-a-century of Texas sun kind of way, as long as you overlook the scarred-over puncture wounds that cover his cheeks like a bumpy purple beard. He's left his truck idling in your driveway, and you admire that kind of confidence. You wish it were contagious. He drops his cigarette and grinds it out with the toe of his boot on your welcome mat. So, he says, where's little reptile? You lead him to your office and point under the desk. It lives down there, you say, although I can't be more specific than that. He shines a flashlight on the floor, around the wall moldings, behind the desk, inside the drawers, over the tangled wires that snake out from your CPU. Ain't no gharial here, he says. Oh, it's here, you tell him. It comes out when I hit Control-S, when I'm saving the final version of a story. It bites off my toes. Well, he says, then I guess we need to lure her out. Better get down to it, my time ain't cheap. You mean write? Finish? Hit Control-S? Well, hell yeah, if that's what makes her hungry. You settle into your desk chair, crack your knuckles, wiggle your remaining toes. You turn on the computer, you open a new document, you get ready to write. You listen to his truck's engine grumbling in the driveway. You wonder how much gas it has in the tank. The man puts his flashlight between his teeth, adjusts the coil of rope on his hip, pulls a mesh net from a deep pocket, and crouches down to begin his vigil over the dark beneath your desk. His hands hold the net perfectly still. They don't tremble, they don't twitch, and you know that when, if the time comes, those hands will strike with precision and purpose and cold-blooded quickness. You could pretend you have hands like that. Maybe that's all you need to do, is pretend. Thank you.